Hey everyone, welcome back. We all know the struggle, right? Trying to keep up with everything going on, especially with all the complexities out there. But that's why you're here, tuning in, because you know we're all about getting to the heart of the matter, making sense of it all.
Exactly. Cutting through the noise and figuring out what really matters.
And today, well, we've got something that's definitely caught our attention. A brand new bill in the U.S. House of Representatives, and it's all about Pakistan.
A pretty significant development, definitely worth a closer look. We've been digging into some recent reporting from dawren.com, their article from March 26th, 2025. So we're going to break down this bill for you, lay out exactly what it's trying to do and why it's making waves.
Yeah, this one has important written all over it. So first things first, what's the official name of this bill and who's behind it?
Okay, so it's called the Pakistan Democracy Act. And right away you notice something interesting. It's bipartisan,
Bipartisan meaning.
meaning it's got support from both sides of the aisle. It was introduced by Republican Congressman Joe Wilson from South Carolina and Democrat Jimmy Panetta from California.
Okay, so right off the bat, that tells you it's not just some partisan political play. They must see some common ground here.
Absolutely. Bipartisan support always suggests there's something deeper going on.
Yeah.
Especially in the current political climate, it makes you pay attention.
When did this bill actually get introduced?
The article mentions it was introduced on a Monday, so thinking about the publication date, that probably means either March 24th or 25th of this year.
Very recent.
Very recent. And from here, it's been referred to the House Foreign Affairs and Judiciary Committees for further consideration. That's where the real scrutiny and debate will happen.
Okay, so that's the procedural stuff. But what's at the heart of this Pakistan Democracy Act? What's it actually trying to accomplish?
Well, the big thing is definitely the call for sanctions. But it's not just general sanctions on the whole country. They're specifically aimed at Pakistani state functionaries, people in positions of authority.
That's interesting, being so specific. What's the justification for these sanctions?
The core issue is alleged human rights violations. The bill even directly mentions the persecution of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. That's clearly a major driving force behind this legislation.
Yeah, I mean, that situation has been in the news for a while, but how does this bill connect to human rights violations? What are the specific mechanisms?
What's fascinating is they're using a very specific legal tool for this. The bill invokes the U.S. Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act. It's a powerful piece of legislation.
So for those of us who aren't legal scholars, what exactly does the Global Magnitsky Act allow the U.S. to do? Break it down for us.
Sure. Essentially, it gives the U.S. government the authority to impose some pretty strong measures, like denying visas or restricting entry to the United States for individuals. But here's the key. It targets specific individuals who are credibly accused of being involved in serious human rights abuses or major acts of corruption. So it's not punishing an entire country, it's going after specific people.
Ah, so it's like a very targeted tool. So in this case, with this new bill, who exactly in Pakistan could be facing these sanctions?
The bill is pretty clear on that. It specifically names Pakistan's army chief as a potential target for these sanctions. And they've put a time frame on it, too, within 180 days.
Wow, that's pretty direct. So basically, they're putting a clock on the situation saying, hey, you've got 6 months to address these concerns.
Yeah, it's a very direct approach. And the bill doesn't stop there. It also instructs the U.S. administration to do something specific.
What are they asking the U.S. administration to do?
They're asking them to actively identify other individuals, people who they believe are involved in the suppression of political opposition in Pakistan. And once they've identified those individuals, they're supposed to put them on a sanctions list.
So that sanctions list, that's where things get real, right? That means they could face those visa denials and travel restrictions. But is there any way back from this? Are there any conditions where those potential sanctions could be lifted?
The bill does outline certain conditions. Pakistan would have to make some big changes, like demonstrably ending any kind of interference by the military in the country's governance.
So really taking steps to ensure civilian control. And what about those who were detained?
Right. The bill also calls for the release of all those who it deems to be wrongfully detained political detainees. It's like a checklist of things Pakistan would need to do to get those sanctions lifted.
Okay, that gives us a pretty clear picture of the bill itself. But to really grasp what's going on, we need to understand the bigger picture, right? Like, what's the context that led to this bill being introduced now?
Yeah, you can't just look at the bill in isolation. You have to zoom out and see what's been happening. And a big part of that is the role of PTI supporters in the U.S. Ever since Imran Khan was removed from office back in 2022, they've been really active trying to get the attention of U.S. lawmakers.
So they've been lobbying, essentially. What kind of things have they been doing?
It's been a pretty multifaceted campaign, organizing demonstrations all over the U.S., setting up meetings with members of Congress and their staff, and just generally working to raise awareness about what's happening in Pakistan and urging the U.S. to take a stronger stance. It's been a consistent effort for several years now.
And this isn't the first time the U.S. Congress has focused on Pakistan. The article mentions a similar resolution passed last year. Can you refresh our memories on that?
Yeah, that's important to remember. In June 2024, the House of Representatives passed a resolution about Pakistan, and it had remarkable bipartisan support. Like 98% of the votes were in favor. It really showed how much concern there was within the House.
Wow, 98%. That's a huge majority. What did that resolution actually say?
Well, it urged then President Joe Biden to be more proactive, to put more pressure on Pakistan regarding their democracy and the rule of law. It was basically the House saying, hey, Mr. President, this is important. You need to do more.
But then the article mentioned something really crucial. The Biden administration didn't actually take any action in response to that resolution. It makes you wonder, did that lack of action kind of fuel this new bill? Like maybe some lawmakers felt they needed to try something with more teeth?
Yeah, it's a valid point. When you have such overwhelming support for a resolution and then nothing really happens, it's not surprising that some members of Congress might want to push for something stronger, like the possibility of sanctions we see in this new bill. It's like they're saying, okay, words weren't enough. Let's see if action gets their attention. And the article even points out some more recent actions by some of the same people involved in this new bill.
Like what specifically? What else have they been doing?
Well, just last month, Congressman Joe Wilson, one of the main sponsors of this Pakistan Democracy Act, teamed up with a Republican Congressman, August Pfluger. They sent a letter to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. In the letter, they directly called for the U.S. to step in and, in their words, restore democracy in Pakistan. It was a pretty blunt request for more aggressive action from the executive branch. And they even specifically mentioned Imran Khan.
They did.
They did. They urged Secretary Rubio to really engage with what they called Pakistan's military regime. And their goal was to secure the release of Imran Khan. They even highlighted Imran Khan's past interactions with U.S. officials, emphasizing the good relationship he had.
They're using those past connections to make their case. It's interesting how Congressman Wilson keeps coming up. It seems like he's been a pretty vocal advocate on this issue for a while. The article mentions a similar letter he sent to a former president too, right?
You're right. He sent a very similar letter to President Donald Trump back when he was in office. And in that one, he went even further, suggesting that keeping Imran Khan imprisoned could actually harm U.S. strategic interests in the region.
So he's connecting it to broader geopolitical concerns, not just human rights. And it's not just those two congressmen either. The article lists a whole bunch of members of Congress from both parties who have publicly called for Imran Khan's release.
Definitely. The list includes Representatives Greg Cesar, Rashida Tlaib, Haley Stevens, Ilhan Omar, Brad Sherman, Ro Khanna, August Pfluger again, and Jack Bergman. That's a pretty diverse group politically. Having all these voices from both sides calling for Imran Khan's release probably laid the groundwork for this more forceful legislative push we're seeing now. So with all this happening in the U.S., how has Pakistan reacted?
Well, the article says that the Pakistani embassy in Washington has declined to comment on the Pakistan Democracy Act so far.
The classic no comment.
Right. It's probably too early for them to say anything official, but behind the scenes, they must be thinking about how to handle this.
Of course, they're definitely not ignoring it. The article does give us a little peek behind the curtain. It says Pakistani officials are probably exploring diplomatic options, trying to slow this bill down or even stop it completely.
Which makes sense. That's standard diplomatic protocol when you're dealing with potentially damaging legislation from another country. You work your contacts, try to make your case quietly.
Exactly. And it seems like this bill is very much on their radar. The article mentions that it was a hot topic at a recent diplomatic reception held at the Pakistan embassy.
So they're definitely concerned. But from what you're saying, it sounds like publicly, at least, the Pakistani diplomats are trying to project a sense of calm.
There's definitely a feeling of cautious optimism, maybe even hoping that this bill won't actually gain enough support to become law. They seem to be banking on the fact that the U.S. still sees Pakistan as an important strategic partner, especially when it comes to security.
And they're even using recent events to back that up, right?
Yeah, they're pointing to the fact that Pakistan recently helped arrest and deport an ISK terrorist. It's like they're saying, look, we're a valuable ally in the fight against terrorism. Don't forget that. Okay, so we've got the bill itself, all the background, and Pakistan's reaction. But what do the experts think?
The article mentions an expert from the Wilson Center, right?
They do. They quote Michael Kugelman, the director of the South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center. And he didn't mince words. He called this bill one of the most significant pieces of legislation on Pakistan in quite some time.
Well, that's a strong statement coming from someone like him. He definitely doesn't throw those words around lightly. It tells you how seriously experts are taking this.
And what about the chances of this bill actually becoming law? Did he weigh in on that?
He did. He said that passing the bill may be a long shot. So he's acknowledging that it's not a sure thing. There are lots of hurdles to clear in the U.S. legislative process.
But he also made another point, right? Something about the impact even if it doesn't pass.
Exactly. He said that even just the introduction of this bill will likely spook Pakistan's leadership. It basically sends a message. We're watching you, and we're not happy with what we're seeing. It could push them to make some changes internally, even if the bill itself doesn't become law. Sometimes even the threat of action can be enough to get things moving.
Makes sense. No one wants to be on the wrong side of a powerful country. But, as we've discussed, it's a complicated situation, and the bill's future is still uncertain. There are many moving parts.
Totally. I mean, the overwhelming bipartisan support for that early resolution shows there's definitely deep concern in the U.S. Congress about what's happening in Pakistan. But turning that concern into concrete legislative action, especially something as strong as sanctions, well, that's a whole different ballgame. It's a long and winding road.
All right, so listeners, here are the key takeaways for you. We have this new bill, the Pakistan Democracy Act, introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives. And its main goal, to potentially slap sanctions on Pakistani officials, with a specific focus on the army chief. And all of this stems from allegations of human rights abuses, especially those connected to how Imran Khan and the political opposition have been treated. It's important to remember that this isn't happening in a vacuum. PTI supporters in the U.S. have been actively lobbying for years, and there's been growing concern within Congress for a while now. And we've seen Pakistan's initial reaction, a cautious no comment, but also some hints of behind-the-scenes maneuvering to try and counter this bill. And as we heard from the expert, this bill, even if it doesn't become law, is already sending a powerful message.
A message that's likely being heard loud and clear in both Washington and Islamabad. This is a story with a lot of layers: domestic politics in both countries, international relations, and the always complex issue of human rights. It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
And that brings us to something for you to think about. Even if this particular bill doesn't get passed, what could be the long-term consequences for the relationship between the U.S. and Pakistan? And how might these kinds of international pressures, whether they result in specific laws or not, end up shaping the political landscape inside Pakistan down the line? It's a complex web of factors, and this bill is just one piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. Food for thought. We'll keep you updated as this story develops.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.